Sure, abuti ona ke.
Farmer, your hand is up.
Thank
The
you,
Honorable Farmer.
Chairperson. Maybe I should try and assist Honorable Pinar by saying that corporates, one need to look at beneficiation. On the one hand, you have the corporate big companies that in essence are making millions and millions out of the sector. And where those millions go to is lining the pockets of the rich, to put it in that manner. But at the same time, one does not want to be too critical upon that because it's part of the economy and we want our economy to grow. We want our economy to do good. And you would never be able to remove profits out of an economy, then it's not an economy anymore. So I really try on this one, I really try to be as objective as I can because I am firmly of the view that our fishing sector is on its way to a collapse if we do not intervene. And in the event of a collapse, it will do incredible harm, not only to the environment, but also to our economy as a country. So I think the answer lies within working together as a country in getting to an answer or a solution that can really be seen as a win-win for everyone. And I mean from corporate right down to the poor on the fishing markets. So I think, Chairperson, from the starting point, we need to tell Kobus to continue and go ahead as a committee. This issue needs to be resolved. We cannot lose the sector. We cannot have this sector collapsing. It's too big. It feeds too many people. And there are too many jobs dependent on this sector. So we cannot have it to collapse. But if we don't force, I'm using the word force. But if we don't force the department to see that they need to take better care of the small-scale fishers in order for the stocks in the sea to survive, because you're forcing fishermen to sea to poach, because they are going to survive, even if it means by illegal manner, they are going to survive. And that means that not giving them a sustainable livelihood from the sea, you are creating them, you are turning them into poachers. Because there's no way a fisherman will sit next to the sea and starve, or see his children starve. He will go and poach. But poaching is killing our resource. And we need to work against it. I'm firmly of the view that to eradicate poaching, we need to allow the fishermen to be able to feed themselves and their children and give their children a good future out of the resource of the sea. So my questions in this regard, first and foremost, Kobus, I totally agree with your presentation, and I think we must push ahead. And if the department, unfortunately, is not seeing that we need to intervene urgently for this sector to survive, then we must make them see somehow. I want to ask from the Legal Resource Center as well as Masifundisi. this thing created by the department, wrongfully so, that we now try to correct in the way that the small-scale fishing sector is being dealt with, or is created. It has been running for a couple of years now in communities, and they've been operating on this thing for some time now. So in my view, I think the practice out there has shown us that even what we've envisaged, what it brought about, and how it's working in practice, and whether it's succeeding or not. I want to get at the basket situation with the area to catch. For instance, you cannot give Lambert's Bay a basket including abalone. Lambert's Bay doesn't have abalone. And then you tell that fishers they can only fish there. They will never be able to catch the abalone in their basket because there is no abalone in Lambert's Bay, for instance. So the basket situation that I can see was seen as probably a good thing, might now with hindsight not actually be working as it was intended to. Maybe so I think maybe the way we've envisaged the solution to be might also be reviewed in a way. I think the small-scale fishing or fisheries sector should be properly defined. I'm not sure it is properly defined simply because of what I just said, but also fishermen. I don't know if I can agree with you that you say, when you say, but they don't want to be commercial. I think there is a sense of want to be commercial, even though they don't have the necessary capacity to be commercial, but they want to operate in the same way of being able to make money, to elevate themselves out of a poor classification. So another question I have was, after the settlement order was agreed upon and the order was made, it doesn't seem as if the Act was ever amended to accommodate the order of court. If you can maybe explain that a bit more. But the small scale, in my view, the small scale fishing sector as created by the department is a total nightmare. It doesn't work. I am firmly of the view it impoverishes our people even further. And the other reason, Chair, I think we should intervene is, I had this discussion with the minister, the current minister, and I have somewhat reserved on being too critical on the minister himself, because he's relatively new, and a lot of these issues doesn't only arrive now that he's there. It's old issues, so one doesn't want to be too critical on him. But I did tell him, the minister himself, in our meeting on the boat the other night, he's very big on environment. But when we asked him something about fishing, or let me show you what I asked him. I asked him, there was this co-op in my hometown where I'm coming from, which is Lambert's Bay, is the cooperative there did eventually get their permit, but it was 2 days before the season closes. So they couldn't do anything really with it. And the question was to the minister whether the time to catch can be extended to allow them to catch. And this is the problem, if I can put it in brackets, I have with the minister, is that he does not know enough about the fishing sector So he had to go to the officials in the department to give him some information of what's going on. And the department officials just said, but it's not possible. And he came back with an answer to me saying, but it's not possible. So for me, that's a challenge with regards to where the minister is at. He knows what to do when it's environment and that kind of thing, but his weakness in the three sectors within his department is fisheries. So that one will always be lacking, and he will then always be dependent on what the officials is saying to him. And for me, and for the fishermen out there, the officials in DFF in fishing is a problem. In fact, I also told this to the minister that there's some serious allegation amongst the fishermen about fishery officials taking bribes or being corrupt in some way or the other. And I've asked them what's the possibility of lifestyle audits and that kind of thing for department officials. But I really, Pinar, for your sake, I really am not too critical on the minister. I don't want to be, because I know he's new. And I don't want to critique him on wrong things going in the department, but he's dependent on officials who are suspect. Let me just say that. So whatever he's led by from officials might end up being critiqued by fishermen. So, Chairperson, I, in essence, am very happy for this meeting. When I opened the information and the notice, I immediately started to speak to fishermen. And believe me, they are all awaiting a back report from me on this meeting for some good news at last. They are obviously not very happy with the time Parliament processes take, obviously, but they are in essence very happy with some things finally seems to be going their way through this process of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to everybody. I don't have any questions. I just have a comment to make. I think through you, Chair, we should initiate a meeting with the presenters here today and the department, because the majority of the questions that one wants to raise it applies to the department. And we cannot go forward if we don't get the right information from them. And I would also then suggest that the minister be present to be able to waylay what Honourable Farmer has just said, because it's bad to speak of someone and say ABC without that person being able to substantiate or stand up for him or herself. So if we could go forward on this, we do that. And then with regard to the committee bill, brilliant idea, Kobus, thank you very much. But as you said, it is for the committee to take forward now. You've done the initial work, and I think we must try and build on that. And with Honourable Farmer having all the background knowledge on SSFs, I think it would be wise for him to share everything with us that can be incorporated into your report that you've started. And thank you again to the presenters. I see the passion. And from my side, I also wish to see the small-scale fishers succeed, because it is a livelihood, and that's what we're about, creating jobs and a growing economy. Thank you very much.
I'll take these two hands, Honorable Mabilo, Honorable Sithole. Start, Honorable Mabilo.
It's me.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Dlamini.
Chair, I must indicate that I have in the beginning, inform the chair, I've got some challenges pertaining to hearing. I must still go to the doctor for checkup. But I must say, at least I have listened to the two presentations, including that of Mr. Kubo Jostin. From my side, I'm also coming from a fishing community, which is Northern Cape, Port Nolloth, 100 Club Bay, all the bays there is a fishing community. And I have reported in the past that we had a thriving fishing activity, including at the jetty. We had a fishing factory that employed thousands of jobs. In my other capacity as a former government employee, environment, I used to visit that factory, but it is closed. It's a debate for another time. I acknowledge the presentation by the experts in relation to the Marine Living Resource Act, and also, Honorable Chair, the purpose thereof in relation to giving effect to the equity court and so forth around the small fishing industry. My departure point, Chair, is in relation to the transformation itself, one, two, inclusivity within the fishing industry, and also broadening the economic opportunities, and also to ensure there's massive participation. In other words, communities living around coastal areas must benefit. Communities living around the parks must benefit. In other words, it's a paradigm shift in terms of changing the status quo, where the communities living around natural resources, their only means of survival is to sell their labor. That has to change so that they become active participants in their own growth and development in as far as economic opportunities is concerned. So I'll not be asking questions, I'll be broadly just commenting. And the whole question that we cannot run away from is the imbalances of the past that must be justifiably addressed, and is an ongoing matter. But safe to say, Chair, we must not lose sight of the fact that 25 years ago, the year 2000, this country hosted sustainable development. I hope colleagues will remember that in Johannesburg. The whole world ascended to Johannesburg. That time was still the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, that are 17. And we were a couple of years away from the implementation of the MDGs, which transformed into the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. We are 5 years away from that, the 2030 development goals. I will emphasize that what I raise in that context. To say one of the key issues, I hear my colleagues, they are correct that there's a threat in relation to the depletion of the natural resources. It's a real threat, and it affects livelihoods. But in the context of the SDGs, Sustainable Development, we've got to embrace sustainable fishing in all aspects, in all facets of natural resources, that they must replenish themselves. So it goes as well with the question of climate change, which I think when we were in Durban during that oversight, we were exposed to the dangers of climate change, where because of weather patterns, there is the decay of fish, moving from where they are naturally are to outlets. But the threat of poaching remains a threat, especially when we don't have the necessary human resource in relation to safeguarding our own natural resources. So I agree with Farmer, as I indicated, that this constitute hope, and the intervention needs to be welcome. Ours, Chair, is to ensure that there is justice in relation to the fishing rights be given to the small fishers at a much faster rate. And also the support. There must be focus on support so that the key stakeholders as a small fishing communities, they are empowered. And also I like the notion of the community-based management that we must encourage so that they take charge of their own affairs. But I think there are certain elements that I want to recommend that they are strengthened. Is the whole question of monitoring and enforcement. That is key. The whole question of job creation, as indicated, the potential thereof, the value addition, community development, and the balance of the ecosystem. For me, Chair, that constitutes a significant progress, and I hope and trust that with the challenges that are presented, the gaps that are raised, weaknesses, the status quo cannot remain. It has to be pushed. When we go to our coastal communities for oversight, we will be able then to give them at least information that will encourage them. So I deeply welcome these interventions, the reviews, the presentation, but my view as a public rep is that it should not end up with us only. It must go to the recipients, those that matters most. Yes, we were in Saldanha last year as an oversight. There's a need, Chair, that we will recommend that we go as much as possible to the coastal areas to go and give them this kind of information and ensure that we strengthen the gaps. At least we take heart to the fact that we engaged the minister on the ship. And the minister was amenable to the concerns. However, there are gaps, there are deficiencies, there are weaknesses that needs to be strengthened. So at this point, I will not throw the baby with the bath of water to say this is step in the right direction. Our robust oversight role should be strengthened. It should not be only us who speak vociferously or eloquently because we come from the coastal areas. It should be for all the stakeholders, especially as I indicated. How far are we with the 17 SDGs in relation to sustainable fishing and so forth? So it requires of us to constantly monitor the developments so that as a country and as stakeholders, we contribute towards our obligations in relation to the Paris Agreement. It's not only a matter of the Minister of Transport or the Minister of Environment. It's a matter of all of us. Climate change is with us and is affecting our natural resources. Ours is to ensure that we sustain this for the coming generation. This generation of us is coming to an end, but there must still be life beyond this. And I think your contributions in this regard are valued. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I thought I must give a deeper input in relation to this matter, because this is a matter that is very close to my heart. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you a lot, Honorable Mabilo. Honorable Sithole.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and my apology earlier on. I wanted to speak before Mr. Mabilo because I knew that I would be in this position right now. Because when he speaks, he makes sure that he closes all the ranks. Now, I'm in support of his statement, and including Honorable Farmer's statement. Now, I just want to give my appreciation to the staff members that have compiled this report, that they have done a great job, and that finally we need to engage the affected individuals or organizations through the invitation to Parliament for feedback and progress, because at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. And then I also want to encourage members that are in our portfolio, like Honorable Mabilo have said, that this issue it hits straight at home, because from where he come from, he's also affected, and Honorable Farmer also. That during this constituency time that we are going to, or a period, the interaction with these people, it must be made, and so that when we do our oversight, we know very well where the problems are. We are not only going to rely on the reports that we are going to get, but we are also going to rely on the honorable members that are coming from those areas. Because in an honest fact, Honorable Farmer spoke about something to do with jobs, especially for these fishermen or fisherwomen that are there. You see, we've got a high rate of unemployment in South Africa. Now, wherever a person is trying their level best to put food on the table, as the public reps, who must be in support of that person and give necessary advice where it's needed, so that whatever hustle that he or she is trying to do, it must not collapse, but it must also continue. It's a fact that we cannot all be lawyers, all be in parliament. Some people are supposed to be doing something there, but they need a support at the end of the day. Now, if fishing is something that it puts food on their table, it takes their children to school, for us is to support them. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson. Greetings to your good self, honorable members and colleagues. Chair, unlike Honorable Sithole, Mina, I'm happy to speak at the end, because I'll not talk a lot, because most of the speakers would have covered me. So it's nice to be at the end. Chair, I think we're really in support of the process to unfold. We really appreciate the work that has been done by all role players. Anything that speaks to including the previously disadvantaged communities, for me, it's a highlight, because we are talking about protecting the plight of our people. Therefore, the proposed document, for me, it's fine. And I believe it's a working document. We're still gonna have inputs along the way. We still have gonna have questions of clarity, ratification, and so forth. But any legislation, any regulation that will speak in addressing the challenges that are confronted by the previously disadvantaged communities, I will forever be in the favor. Therefore, I support that. Let the approach, let the process and approach take place and move forward, Chair. We are delighted and impressed as a committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, honorable members. I will first I'll just hand over to whoever to respond to the questions, because there were questions as much as they were comments. So I would like to give you first to respond to the questions, and then if there are still further discussions, we take that after your responses, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the honourable members. I'll start and then I'll hand over to my colleagues. Maybe to start with Honourable Pienaar, and say, you know, you may call this a noble cause, but it is in fact a constitutional imperative. It is legal. These are legal rights of the communities, recognized by the Constitution and in court cases. So you must find a way to realize these rights. It's not optional. And you know, the same kind of protection is not afforded to the industrial and certainly the recreational sector. I do maybe have good news though, and that is that on foreign vessels, it's a bit of a red herring. It's often raised as a big issue in our fishing regulation, which in fact it is not. But what independent scientists tell us is that the biggest issue is the recreational sector, not industry, but the recreational sector, which is almost entirely unregulated. I mean, it is extraordinary, the amount of fish that is taken out by sports fishers in South Africa without any regulation. So there's no, you know, the department doesn't even know how many recreational permits are issued all the time. And there's very little limit. So there's not the kinds of, the pie is in a sense not even, they're not even in the pie. They're outside of it, and it's very difficult to know. The department certainly can't know how many recreational permits are issued, and it is simply not regulated. So scientists, and they do a lot of work in the Eastern Cape on this, they say that is the biggest issue when it comes to sustainable fisheries in South Africa. And certainly if you want to create a viable small-scale sector, the recreational sector is where you will start when it comes to regulating. Now, that is important, and I think it's also important to note that, remember, the large-scale industry and small-scale that won't fish for the same species, and you know, it's near shore and offshore and so on. So it's also not always direct competition. Sometimes it is, but not all the time. Can small scale be sustainable? Well, so again, we can't possibly say that small scale can't be sustainable while we allow the recreational sector to fish in a fairly unregulated manner. And of course, internationally, we know that small scale is far more sustainable than large scale industrial fishing. Then on the issue of the basket, and Honourable Farmer, I agree with everything you've said, really, and it's our experience. The one thing I want to note is this idea of the basket of species. So the idea, or what the law requires, is not for the same basket to go to all the fishers. The idea that what the law requires is that the department was supposed to ensure that every community has a basket of species that is appropriate to them, so that they won't have things in their basket that they can't fish. That just didn't happen at all, and so these baskets are completely arbitrary, and indeed, people end up with species in their basket that they can't fish, because it's, you know, some done by a departmental official who doesn't know what's happening on the ground. So I completely agree, but I don't think the basket was the problem. It's how that's been implemented. But I do think that you are correct, that people have now for many, many years, first they were in the interim relief regime, which we haven't even touched on, and then the small scale, how it's now been implemented. And so, yes, I think there may well need to be a review of the solution. But I think we have an incredibly good starting point in the policy that was so well consulted. Then I also agree with you that there are many small scale fishers who will say, we would want to be commercial, or at least in some form. What one needs to acknowledge is that the small-scale fisher sector has got a massive spectrum of fishes. So in the Eastern Cape and KZN, people, fishers fishing with a landline, handheld line off a rock is completely different to, for example, West Coast fishers. And so this sector was an attempt to deal with all of them. And so, yes, you will get a spectrum of what people's vision is for themselves in this sector. But all of that was, I think, carefully dealt with in the policy. It was just not implemented. Then I want to say that the example that you use about Lambert's Bay, it's happened in a number of communities that you get the permit after the season is closed or 2 days before, as you say. And this is part of the over-bureaucratization of the sector. So there are about 4 or 5 officials in the department dealing with the entire sector, and yet they are trying to micromanage every one of these thousands of communities. It's impossible. And so in a sense, we're calling for the deregulation of the sector, because the way it's overwhelming, the task that the department set for itself, and it's in any event not what the policy had envisioned. Also, just to say on, allegations of corruption and so on, all I can say, and I think it is important to say, is that the rollout of the the rollout of identifying the fishers across the country, but in particular in the Western Cape, which was when Minister Creasy was minister, was so fraught that Minister Creasy herself went to court to review her own decision to allocate those permits. She said that it was so problematic that in fact she had to redo it. It was redone, unfortunately, only in the Western Cape, not the other provinces, because the problems were everywhere. It was redone. Unfortunately, maybe only slightly less problematically, but the identifications of the fishers, of actual members of these co-ops are hugely problematic, and actual fishers in many areas are left out of these cooperatives. And then just one thing I wanted to mention, which we haven't mentioned, and this is a fact everywhere, but I think in particular in the Eastern Cape and KZN, it's a real problem. So we talk about these marine protected areas and nature reserves. We should remember that in many instances, these very fishing communities were forcibly removed to create those reserves. And now they're still reserves. In some instances, like Dwesa-Kwebe, there was restitution of the reserve, so it now belongs to the community, but they're not allowed to enter it. And when they do, or when they try and fish in what is their property, they get shot at by rangers. So we have clients in Isimangaliso, 2 brothers of the same family, a year apart, were shot and killed by rangers for fishing at St. Lucia. In Dwesa-Kwebe, a fisher was shot and paralyzed for life by a ranger. So we didn't mention these realities, but I think it's very important to mention it, because people are having to enter these areas, by fear of death. But it's what they will continue to do because it puts food on the table, and it is what they've always done. Thank you.
Yes, maybe just picking up on that in the sense that I think, thanks first of all, honorable members, it's great to hear that you are interested in continuing to take this forward. And indeed, I mean, I think it was Fabian that said, fishers will continue to fish. You cannot be put in front of the sea, and if you have to eat, you will. And I think that's also where what we have seen in terms of the implementation process, both in terms of the regulation and the actual implementation, has been a process that has been very much more about policing and limiting access for small-scale fishers than it has been about facilitating access. And I think this is the biggest grudge the communities have. They found themselves very invested, more than 10 years from the court case to the actual initiation of the implementation, in trying to participate in a process that was about giving them access, and they found themselves at the end in a process that is very much about restricting their access also in terms of the entire permit system, where imagine being a small-scale fisher, cooperative members leading that cooperative, and now finding yourself to have to apply for at least 5-6 different permits every year. Some of the permits requiring a longer sort of paper trail in terms of all the different kind of permits that you need to operate a boat, for example, and the cost that goes with that, from surveying the boats, from making sure that they are fit to be at sea. And then you apply and you don't hear anything for months, no feedback. Then you get feedback and you're told, oh, but something here, you didn't tick this box. And now you have to tick that box. Permits go back, takes another month, a few months, and you only get these permits back maybe a week before the fishing season closes or when the fishing season closes. And in the meantime, you also already engaged the department in asking, is it possible to look at an extension? And there is no response until such time where 6 months down the line, you're told, no, definitely you cannot get an extension because the season is closed. This is not going to work for the reproduction patterns of the fish species at subject, which was, by the way, the case of Port Nolot that we experienced this year. And so this is where I think also in terms of considering the small-scale fishery sector versus the other sectors, this is not really a competition in our view. It's about recognizing the existence of the sector, as Wilmin correctly pointed out. I mean, the law says that the sector needs to be recognized. And indeed, there is ways to ensure equitable approaches to the sector. So, for example, when it comes to commercial fishing rights, the fishing rights allocation process around the lionfish, which is a very important species for our sector, started in 2020. Eventually, it took some time, it was finalized in 2022. That process was happening while the small-scale fishery sector was already established. And the small-scale fishery sector over the years was promised 50% of that pie when it comes to traditional line fish. We submit comments during the process, and we are told, you know, this is the fishing rights allocation process. It doesn't really deal with small scale. And even though we submit and we engage, it's only later when we receive the sort of notice of the allocation of the sector, the way we have to go on and do our own calculation to actually assess that more than 70% to 85%, depending on the area, of fishing rights for the traditional line fish are being allocated to the commercial sector, leaving the small-scale fishery sector with less than 15% of a key sector for their livelihood and survival, really. So that is also part of the issues. In a sense, the department has taken an approach that looks at managing these sectors independently from each other, but then at the same time saying to the small-scale fishery sector as kind of the last resort sector, this is all there is left. We cannot really take the rights away from commercial fishing companies. We cannot take rights away from recreational, even though it's important that, again, we emphasize when it comes to the recreational sector, there isn't a similar approach that kind of looks at how many tons of fish we can dedicate to this sector. It's only based on the number of days that people can go out at sea. So by a mission of the department, they also now, as the post office services are collapsing, they're looking at introducing an online system for permitting. But as things stand now, they have no ways to assess how many recreational fishers are active and how much fish is taken out. And at the same time, they're restricting the sector that creates livelihood for so many people in our communities. I mean, we are talking about 22,000+ people recognized as part of the sector, but we know that there is many other thousands that haven't been recognized as bona fide fishers. There is no consideration on the impact on the value chain, especially involvement of women and youth. And this is just the very beginning of assessing how deep of a crisis we are facing when it comes to the communities. So yes, this is, I think, something that should be considered also in terms of how the baskets are designed for the small-scale fishers. I mean, the idea was really to sort of facilitate the very fact that indeed traditional fishers, customary fishers, artisanal fishers, you know, they take from the sea what the sea has to offer to them in their vicinity. They don't have boats that can go for 3 or 4 days of fishing trips. They will rely on what's in the near shore and the coastline. But so how can it be that what is immediately available to you is not part of your basket, and then you've been given, like for example, some communities on the West Coast, they were given sardines. Sardines cannot be found on the West Coast. They can only be found in the Indian Ocean. And so this is the kind of issues that we see taking place with all these, we are talking more than 120 communities on the ground. I also just wanted to really emphasize that indeed there is hunger in the sector for engagement. And I don't know if this is a proposal that it's out of order, but I will make it anyway. We are having our national meeting with representatives of small-scale fishing communities from the community-based organization Costa Links. We will have more than 50 members there. The meeting will take place in Strand in the week of the 29th of September. So we will be very happy to invite the select committee or representatives thereof to participate and engage directly with fishers from all the 4 coastal provinces that can give you firsthand a sense of what the experience is, but also what they see as solutions. Because I think it's indeed, I think, again, Honorable Member, you're so correct in saying, I mean, it's 30 years of fighting this fight, and things have changed in communities. But this doesn't mean that they still don't have a sense of what and a vision of what the solution can be to make this viable. Because this is not just about an economic sector. It's not just about GDPs. It's about really the very fabric, social fabric of the communities on the coast. And it is about also a living heritage and a cultural heritage that if we lose, it's not going to come back. And therefore, I think that's also part of what needs to be considered. It's not just about the economic sense of it all, which there is a lot of, especially if we're looking at this in terms of sustainable development, but there is also an element of culture, tradition, and heritage that also mustn't be lost sight of. Thanks.
Something came up now. The lady opposite me, you spoke about, or was it you, about the fishing, the permits, and how long it takes. Is there a process in place where the small-scale fishers can appeal, or is there no appeal platform for them?
Well, yes. So in terms of the MLRA, any decision by the minister can go through an internal appeal. So yes, they can appeal. The appeals take an enormously long time, and in most instances, for example. So let me give an example. I mentioned when the small-scale fishers were recognized by the department in a couple of years ago. People then all appealed, those that were excluded. But even the appeal process was so problematic that the minister then took that whole process, including the appeals, to the High Court, to ask the High Court to allow the department to try again, which I think is important to mention. Thank you.
Noted, Honorable Farmer, but before that, I should think there's a question I didn't hear you responding to from Honorable Pinar. He was asking if we still have enough fish in our seas, but we'll respond to it when Honorable Farmer is finished.
Thank you, Chairperson. I would really love Masifundisi to to submit a formal request for this committee or a representative of this committee to attend that function that you're planning, because one might want to attend, but in obviously in official capacity, if possible. Secondly, Chair, and maybe this will then be an attempt to answer Honorable Pinar's question, the pie that you were referring to earlier. In the fishing sector, they call it the TAC, total allowable catch. In Afrikaans is totale toelaatbare vangst, the TTV. Now, the scientists determine for a TAC for each year or each season, which means they inform department that for this year you can catch X amount of a particular species, and then the fishing rights for that season is then adjusted based on that TAC, total allowable catch. Now, the point I wanted to make, which I missed earlier to make, is the pressure on the resource. When you have 10 big companies each having a 800-ton boat to catch with, and you have small-scale people each with a 3-ton or even less than a ton little boats, obviously the 800-ton boat is putting the most pressure on the resource and not the small-scale guy. I mean, it's like in plain logic to assess. So I don't think one can go towards the pressure on the resource being considered in allowing too much small scale, because they're not really putting the pressure on the resource. Chairperson, the other issue I also thought we need to be cognizant of further, and I love to say this, and I say this all the time, and people are probably getting bored of me saying this all the time, is my father was a fisherman. My mother was a factory worker for 39 years. And at the end of that 39 years, she walked away with 18,000 rand. Now, the amount of work or jobs being created by this industry, the amount of money generated by this industry really needs to be explained to us as a committee so that we know what we're dealing with in real figures and numbers. Because I'm pretty sure that this fishing industry of this country is $1 billion industry. And we as a committee needs to see and know, when we're dealing with these issues, where is the beneficiation really going to out of this industry? Just to inform us in deliberating and taking decisions on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Kopas, let me give you first and then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My apologies for just maybe wanting to say something about the direction in which the conversation is going, but also maybe to highlight something about my background, which is, I think, useful in terms of this discussion. The discussion at the moment is revolving around a couple of very important things, but it's not necessarily all that is going to trigger the legislative review. When the Secretariat was trying to work out what the problems were, the focus is purely legal. It is purely a case of, if we want to make it that simple, right and wrong according to what the Constitution or the law or the policy is wanting. that is not inclusive of the economics or the sustainability of the sector, because the sector must be economically viable and sustainable regardless of who the players inside of it is. So this review is not about who gets what, but about what the Constitution had said and what the legislation says and what the policy says. But from a sustainability perspective, the first time I was refused access to fishery data was 1993 as a young student. I'm a marine ecologist by training. I've spent years in fisheries data. And South Africa has been pushing its fishing resources to the brink for decades. It is not that it is not important, but it is not something that is going to happen because the process of how the rights are allocated needs to be looked at. It is inside a context of decades of overuse that this is playing out. And I think that's important for the committee to note, because sustainability is a major concern, but it has always been as if fisheries management was in a little bit of a brinkmanship game for a very long time. And I think what's important to note about something like the lionfish sector, the lionfish sector is allocated to a commercial sector, and then the 500,000 plus recreational anglers can catch whatever they can catch. I was a lionfish observer for almost 2 years in Port Elizabeth. And the amount that the recreational sector can take compared to what is on the books as a commercial sector is significant. But that does not change what this review is about. This review is about what did the Constitution say, what does the legislation say, what does the policy say. Within that debate, there will be a lot of players and a lot of issues. But we have tried very hard to keep those away as considerations for the review. It will come up in the review, but the consideration for the review is legalities and constitutions and policies. But inside of that, economics and sustainability will come forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Kopas, for reminding us about your background, really, because it is clear after we've met with the Saldanha Bay small-scale fisheries, we then resolved on the legislation governing the small-scale development and implementation of the small-scale fisheries. So I should think that's the area of focus, because as much as we talk about the things that affects them and whatever, but if we don't legislate towards change so that they are able to benefit, we are not doing anything. I should think really we should focus on the legislation, because that's where we'll have a way forward on the way in which, if you have heard the lady who's coming from the law firm, she is saying they've been representing these people for more than 20 years. So it is upon us as legislators to make a legislation that will change all these things that they are coming to us with. So I should think I agree with Kopas in trying to bring us back to what actually we should be doing as the committee if we want to bring change to the manner in which these small-scale fisheries are being treated. Because there are policies, there's everything, but it is upon us to change everything for them. We are the people who changes whatever in the land, because we are the people who are making laws. We are the people who are changing legislation and do it according to the manner in which we want, so that it favors whoever has come to us. I'm talking also as one who have met with the small-scale fisheries in Saldanha Bay. If you could see the manner in which those people were desperate. And looking at us as the people who will give change to their situations. And we are really discussing here and there, but with what I should think I concur with Honorable Dlamini, because with what Corpus has presented to us, it gives us some way of then intervening as the committee, so that at the end of the day, we pass a legislation so that we are able to assist these small-scale farmers. But I am not closing the debate. If anyone still wants to say something, also I should think you have taken the point by Honorable Farmer that the invitation that you have said should come to the committee through our secretary in writing, so that the chairperson will be able to see what to do in order to have someone who is sent, or even the whole committee if things permit. Thank you. Honorable members, do you still have something to say on the presentations?
Nothing. Sure, I would be honest.